Hey folks, my name's Kevin and it's time for a little bit more knife nerdery. And today we've got a very silly comparison of these two California legal automatic knives that are on very different ends of the price spectrum. On the right, holy crap. On the right, we've got the Protech Runt 5, and this is in the reverse Tanto blade shape and was sent my way as part of the Apex Pass Around group. So thank you to David, aka Blade Banner, for organizing this whole thing, and thank you to Justin at Tier 1 Gear Reviews for sending this my way. And so this one is made in America out of really nice materials, and just, my god, is it snappy. This one is an absolute piece of trash that I've had almost my entire life. Hey, my mom watches this channel. Mom, did you know that I bought this at a flea market when I was just a wee babby child? I've had this that long and it is just trash. So I thought it'd be kind of fun. Wow. I thought it'd be kind of fun to just see what happens when you compare roughly the same concept, but implemented at two totally different quality levels. $5 from a flea market bin versus like $140 made in America. So, okay, right off the bat, what do these have in common? These are both Cali-Legal automatics. And what does that mean? Now, every state and municipality has their own knife laws, and almost all of them are dumb. And especially when it comes to that, people get really, really weird. And here in Oregon, I'm not allowed to carry this at all. I can't carry a automatic knife out and about, no matter what the size it is. I can own it, I can have it in my house, but I can't put this in my pocket and walk around. In California, as long as this blade here is under 2 inches, this is 1.9, I'm going to say this one's probably about 1.75. As long as it's under 2 inches, you can use this. And that whole concept that this being 2 inches is somehow makes this safer or less scary is absolute absurdity. And the fact that this is somehow more dangerous than that, like look how incredibly snappy of an action that you can have from a standard unassisted flipper knife. Yeah, I can't have assisted knives here in Oregon either, not that I would want them, but it's ridiculous. Okay, getting back to this. So these are both deliberately under 2 inches. And when you get autos that are under that size, a lot of people kind of write them off as a novelty. Sometimes it's because they look silly. I don't remember the model number, but Protech has some knives where they've got a more full-size handle and yet a Cali-Legal size blade, and those just look mismatched and kind of dumb, but they're trying to be practical. So they're trying to give you a full 4-finger grip knife while still giving you a legal blade. The reality, though, is that this size blade is actually really, really useful. I'm a big fan of small knives, which is part of the reason why I wanted to check this one out. And it's because they're just really, really practical knives for the types of stuff that I'm doing all the time, which is just regular EDC tasks. I'm opening packages. And this just works so well for that. This blade shape is a reverse Tanto. That's what they call it, but it's very, very similar to other things you'll see labeled as like a modified sheep's foot or Wharncliffe or something like that. And basically the idea is that the tip comes all the way to the bottom and you have a relatively flat surface here. You actually have enough belly here that you can kind of do a rocking, rolling drag cut on a surface, but this tip being down at the bottom is just so convenient and practical for cutting tape. If you want a box opening knife, yeah, this is a fantastic, fantastic option. This blade shape is worse. I'm just going to go with worse. This is kind of a Wharncliffe blade shape. Kind of a modified Wharncliffe. I would almost say spear point in a sense as well, if this was just a little bit higher. Interestingly, this has a hollow grind, I think. Wait, do I have anything I can check that with? This is a flat pair of scissors. Yeah. I don't know how well you'll be able to see that gap. There, this is technically a hollow grind. And honestly, this blade shape's not that bad. Like, this being low down enough means that it's actually pretty easy to puncture a surface with this or to cut along it. But the reality is you've got such an incredibly short distance here that it's really hard to not accidentally get snagged on these absolutely ridiculous to have on this knife serrations down here. Like, what the hell is that? Why would they put these 3 serrations? What? No, just stop it. So from a shape perspective, if this wasn't this serrated, this is honestly not that bad. There's absolutely nothing in the way of a sharpening choil, but given the serrations, you'd never use it. And I don't know. I'm kind of torn because the piercing ability of this comes to a relatively acute tip, would be okay. Like, it would be okay. You get a decent amount of pierceability with this because of the fact that it's not just straight down the way you would find on like a sheep's foot. And this has an acute enough tip that you actually can puncture pretty easily. But if you were looking for piercing, a shape more like this would be better. As far as the materials of the blade, well, that's 20 CV in a gorgeous stonewash finish. Can I get that to focus better? Hello. Yeah, no, there we go. Maybe, there we are. Yeah. And this is 440 stainless. Yeah, this finish, I'm going to say, is, I guess, a satin finish. When you get knives in 440, it's such a soft material that they kind of get this almost melty finish. Like the blade, you don't get these really clean grind lines because it just can't support them. So you get this really kind of soft, smooth finish that looks like the entire thing has been just ever so slightly melted. As a result, also, this has just no edge. I'm going to be honest with you, that's not from use. I've had this my entire life, but I never really cut with it because I was just a dumb kid wanting to have something fling out in my hand. And so this super dull blade here is basically how it came, and that's what you'd expect. This, on the other hand, is a pretty darn sharp edge, and 20 CV will hold that edge for a very long time if heat treated well. And Protech heat treats their 20 CV really well, as far as I'm aware. I think that this blade stock also being just a little bit thinner, this is basically 0.11 and this is 0.12 kind of, means that this would slice through things even better. But again, you're never really going to be able to find out because the kind of slicing through where the full blade matters is where you're kind of cutting up in this range, and you just can't do that kind of slicing motion here because of these stupid serrations at the bottom. So if you're cutting with just this top part, well, that's actually thinner up here because of the way that that works. I don't know. I'm going to call cutting on this one probably a win for that. I also mentioned the total lack of sharpening trail on here, and the sharpening trail on this is actually really, really good. You can see that it's not really like, there's no, the plunge grind comes in behind the handle. And so like the biggest thing you're going to be up against is knocking this handle with your stones as you go. So you'd probably want to tape that off. But the reality is you have plenty of space here to sharpen. So then let's move back and talk about those handles. Okay, this is another place where these things have something in common. They're both made out of aluminum. On the left, we've got unknown kinds of aluminum. And on the right, I think this is also unknown. I don't know if Protech actually says what kind of aluminum they're using, but my guess is that this is what, 60, 61, 60, 65, I forget what the number is, but that kind of high grade hard aluminum that actually holds up really, really well. This is absolute garbage aluminum. But you will see there's no markings on it. Again, because as a child, I never used this, and this has sat in a box for about 30 years. This has that hard anodization that you can do on aluminum that is actually really, really nice. It's got this kind of soft, velvety feel, but the side effect of that is that I don't like the way that it feels personally. I'm the type of person that I don't like things that feel chalky, and the finish that they do on these, while it feels velvety, soft, and pillowy, gives it that kind of, that kind of sound. And I just, I don't personally like it. I don't like it over here on the Protech Malibu either, but the finish is identical. If you're familiar with other Protech knives that have the same kind of thing, the materials are exactly the same and the finish is exactly the same, for better and worse. We've got flat slabs that are not milled out at all inside, and that's both good and bad. The good side is that this feels extremely sturdy, and the handle feels like it can hold up to that absurdly strong spring in there. The bad side is just that this is I don't know if I'd actually call this bad. This knife is under 2 inches of blade and just over 2 ounces of weight, 2.09. And that's so light that you probably wouldn't want it to be much lighter, except it kind of feels like a nugget as a result. And the balance point of this knife is right around where the push button is. And it just feels a little bit handle heavy. And so I would rather this knife be milled out and be even a little bit lighter, and it would feel a little bit more appropriate for the size. Over here, this is actually technically a little bit lighter, largely because this aluminum is the kind of really low-grade aluminum that is practically hollow in comparison. It's just way less dense aluminum. But then, of course, it also has these delightful speed slots. So I guess what I'm going to call that right now, speed slots. And wow, yeah. So the handle shapes on these. This one has this relatively straight design, but with some amount of curve to it, and this nice little spot here for it to fit in your hand. This is a small handle, but with my, on these probably a little bit smaller side of medium hands, I can actually get all 4 fingers on this. And if I'm wanting to put my thumb up on the blade up here, I'm not entirely sure when I would do this in terms of what kind of cutting I would do to have my thumb completely blocking the entire blade, but this would fit well. If I want to instead get my thumb out of the way, this suddenly becomes a 3-finger knife, but with this little patch of sort of jimping. I love this texture. It's actually really cool. It works really nicely as jimping, and it's so unobtrusive. Like, it doesn't stick out. It's not rough. It just works. I love it. And anyway, if you put your thumb right there, your 4-finger rests in that little groove, and this, yeah, that actually works really, really nicely and feels really secure in your hand. These back corners are really nice and smooth, and this entire part here is chamfered in a way that this thing just feels very well finished, and it fits in this kind of pinch grip really, really, really well. Your finger wraps there. You can hold it like that. This back nestles into your hand. Your finger places along this blade, and you can put a lot of force right into that tip. This is where I think this would be best used, and I think this is where you're almost always going to be using it for puncturing to the side, cutting along. It's just fantastic. Now over here, we've got this really dramatic swell at the back, or curve at the back. And so this actually fits in your hand pretty nicely, except what's happening here is this hollow. And so my fingers find that they can't really easily curl in enough to really touch this. And so I feel like my fingers are like searching for something to press on. So while along this surface and back to here, this actually feels really nice in my hand. Everything down here feels wrong and like I don't have a very secure grip. Similarly, this same thing here is problematic in basically every other position I can put this in. I feel like I've got a gap here, and I feel like my fingers need to like press in more than they naturally would be able to do. And so as a result, this just kind of feels bad in my hand. Another thing that you'll notice right off the bat when you hold these is that this one's got hard corners along the entire way. And they're actually surprisingly rough given the fact that they are aluminum and that they are painted. And so you would think that like all of that would kind of round these corners enough. But yeah, kind of sucks. And this is the problem I have with any knife that has just kind of a flat brick slab. So I really appreciate these chamfers that come along the edge and make this just feel so good. Another thing you'll notice when you're holding it in your hand is that it's easy to touch this button. Yeah. And that makes me pretty nervous because pressing in this button is what makes the knife unlock. Yeah, you have to press it in slightly more than flush to make it unlock, but I don't like the fact that it sticks up so proud that when I just kind of put my hand on this, I'm naturally unlocking this knife, whether I'm trying to or not. Yeah, it's not locked just because of where my finger wants to rest. Over here, the knife has this recess around it and it is completely flush. And what that means is that when you're gripping this, you're never pressing that in. You would never be tempted to. I mean, could I if I wanted to? I can start to press it, but I can't press it enough to deploy it at all. That recess means that you have to push down, and it's really easy to do when you're trying to. It actually feels very, very pleasant. But in this kind of normal wrapped around grip, you would never do that. The one thing I am noticing is that this clip, I love their clips. They are recessed with countersunk screws, so there's just nothing in the way. But I do find that in this kind of grip, where I'm putting my finger right here, that this pocket clip corner kind of rubs me the wrong way. I'd say most of the time it's not bad, but it's kind of poking me right there. And they solve this over here by not giving you a clip at all. So you don't feel the clip whatsoever, mostly because it's non-existent. Now, let's look at that. Let's look at that deployment method itself, because this is also going to be just kind of fun. So on the way that automatic knives tend to work, button or plunge lock automatic knives works basically the same way that button lock manual knives work. Namely, there is a little pillar right here, and it's wider on one end than it is during the most of it. That's a bad way of phrasing that. But yeah, there is this thing that goes up and down, and it's thicker on one part. And if it's pushed in all of the way, then it clears the path of the blade. And once it gets to a spot that it's on either the fully closed or fully open position, it can pop back out, and the thicker spot now blocks the knife from opening. So there will be a cutout looking just like that on this side too. Let's see if we can see it. Yeah, it's right in there. And let's see, can we follow this around? And I guess it kind of got covered up by this big obnoxious thing right here. But you can see that it pops back in. Now, why am I talking about that? That popping up and down is your lockup. And so if there's going to be any blade play, it's going to be how tightly does that column there press against these two surfaces. And this piece of crap in the open position has meaningful rock in the up and down direction. It also has terrible side-to-side blade play, of course, but the up and down rock means that it is not a tight fit back here against that, and you can feel it rattling about. In the the closed position, though, it makes no attempts at tolerances whatsoever. You can see that this really dramatically moves, and that's because this little hole in here is a lot bigger than it needs to be. So this entire thing can kind of just wiggle about. Over here, there is absolutely zero blade play side to side and absolutely zero blade play up and down. And when you close it, watch this. It just kind of like stops with this really soft, satisfying wow. It's really just kind of like bonk. And when it's here, there's no movement. This can't wiggle at all. And so this really does lend to this feeling like they've just done this really precisely. Like, yeah, it is not going anywhere. And when it snaps out, snaps out with such authority and is so good locked up that this just feels extremely solid. This feels extremely not. And when I actually first took this out of the little tiny pouch that it came in, do I have that? Yeah. It came in this little pouch with a belt strap in case that's how you want to carry it. Anyway, when I took it out, these were all super loose and this entire thing was rattling about. In fact, just playing with, I tightened this back up right before the video, and just flicking it the few times in this video means this entire thing is wiggling about now. But there's another thing in terms of tolerances that is worth noting. This thing is super solid, and there's no flex to this whatsoever. And so no matter how tightly you squeeze this, it just deploys flawlessly. This one is a piece of crap, and if you squeeze this, yep. Putting pressure, lateral pressure on this handle just won't even deploy. Like, what an absolute piece of crap. Talking about hardware now. So one of the things that's always kind of annoyed me about Protech is that they use mostly hex wrenches. I forget what this is. I think I used a 2.5 millimeter on it, and I think since it's US, it's gonna be whatever the metric equivalent of, the imperial equivalent of that is, but they're kind of interchangeable. And you can see they're using that basically throughout. The clip is using T6 Torx screws. And so it bugs me that they're mixing and matching, and it bugs me also that they're using something that is pretty uncommon on knives these days. But this is still both a common standard that people will probably have in their toolbox, and it's not proprietary, and it's something that people will probably have. It's not like they're putting some crazy weird thing on here or one of those like security Torx bits that's just needlessly complicating things. I think it would be nicer if they got with the rest of the industry and used Torx everywhere, but they aren't, and they're not gonna. So over here on this Malibu, they do the same kind of thing, but it's even a little bit weirder because they use the Torx down here on the clip, but also here for the stop pin, and that just bugs the crap out of me. It's one thing to make the clip different, because taking the clip on and off is kind of a different activity than taking the knife apart, but the fact that to take this knife apart I have to switch bits bugs the crap out of me. So you don't have to do that here, and that's nice. These are actually really nice screws though. Like, look at how deep that is. Let's see. No, I'm wrong. What size did I use on this? This is what, like a 2mm? Yeah, it's definitely the Imperial size. I don't know what it is. What is it, like probably 3/16, something like that? Not 3/16. Whoa, wait, a 1/16? Anyway, these go in really, really far, and that I can show you even though this isn't the right bit for it. These just have really nice depth. And all the way back here, this is again, oh, wait a minute. That does fit. Okay, so it's like using T6 and T8. They have got a bigger one up here, and I don't know what size it is, and they've got a smaller one back here. But anyway, this really grips really, really nicely. It's just a very good, deep, secure pressure. Over here, this was absolute garbage. I tried to tighten this up for this video, and it's kept spinning. This just has such a shallow, like loose engagement here that it keeps wanting to. And then of course we've got Phillips on the back, and you are going right into this aluminum. I think that's true across the board here. You are going right into aluminum and threading into aluminum. I actually don't know. I haven't taken this apart. I'm not allowed to take it apart because of the pass around. I don't know if it threads into something more hard than aluminum, but this one's definitely, you can see it right there, threading right into the aluminum. Oh, and I mentioned that, of course, because with cheap crappy aluminum, this is going to strip out really, really fast. Okay, what else do I want to mention about these? Oh, yeah, that. So what's funny is that this thing just bams open so incredibly hard. Wow! And yet, it's pretty easy to close. One of the problems with automatic knives, and assisted knives too, is that they've got a spring this entire way, and so you can't easily close them without having this like kind of trade-off moment where you're kind of like still trying to keep tension on it and switch over. But this is actually really, if you just kind of like get the hang of it, this is really easy to close. So even though this spring is so incredibly strong to make that kind of snap, it's pretty darn easy to close. And part of that is that the tolerances here means everything lines up so nicely that there's no friction in the system. And so this, I'm only pressing against that spring. And that's also part of the reason why it has such a nice snap, because that spring has nothing impeding it as it's going. So this is not bad. This has a way, way wimpier, way weaker feeling lockup or deployment, and yet it is so much harder to close. Part of that is just awful friction. Like, it's rubbing the entire freaking way. But part of it is that just the spring on this is weird. Like, even though it's barely having any spring out here, like enough that it can just like not go, it's actually really quite a lot of spring tension back here. This is hard to deploy or put in. And so this is one of those things where like you get almost no benefit and a lot of complication. And trying to close this is just kind of brutal. Related to closing though, the centering on this is perfect. absolutely dead on. And so that's one of the things is you don't need to worry about like this kind of rubbing anyway, if you're kind of pushing slightly one way or the other, or if you're trying to awkwardly grab it. This over here is rubbing the entire way right there. Yeah, it's just completely pressed against that. And when this was a little bit looser, which it came loose so easily, this was rubbing like this entire distance. It was like, and so yeah, garbage tolerances, really, really nice tolerances. Okay. Ooh, you know, we both got a lanyard hole. So this has one of my least favorite kind of lanyard holes. It was just a big hole sitting on the front that you can see all the way through. And it's also very small, so this would have to take that kind of micro paracord. But if you're going to have these giant speed slots, then I think that the lanyard hole doesn't really matter. Over here, they've done a really nice version of this, where they've hidden the lanyard into this back little channel right there. Can you see? Yeah. And so if you're going to put a lanyard hole on a knife, this kind of out of the way, unobtrusive style that doesn't break it up is definitely my favorite. It makes it so much cleaner and nicer looking. And so the overall aesthetic of this knife, I think, is really, really nice. It's the same thing they did over here. And I'm not a lanyard person, so I'm never going to put a lanyard on any of these, but it makes me so happy that there's not just like a big hole right there. Is there anything else I want to talk about this? I guess my final conclusions is that this is tremendously fun. Like, the amount of thwack this has feels like it's going to jump out of your hand if you're holding it wimpily like this. So if you're going to hand this to someone, make sure that they're actually gripping it. Then it feels fantastic and super secure. Just a really, really solid, satisfying, authoritative thwack. But if you're holding like this, wow. So yeah, this is tremendously fun. And this is a blade shape and size that I would absolutely love to have in a manual knife that I could actually carry around with me. And this is a handle. Like, if they did make a manual version of this that had, I don't know, I guess a flipper tab, if they made just a micro version of, actually, that's kind of brilliant. A micro version of the Malibu with just the little flipper tab right there. Ooh, Protech, do that. Please do that. Because this is such a fun, fidgety knife. And I would love to have a tiny little micro version. Oh, okay. Anyway, this is actually kind of amazing. I kind of love it. If I could carry this legally in Oregon, I might actually buy one of these. And because of the fact that I'm a non-threatening looking white guy, the odds of me getting harassed by cops about it is super low. So I might just get one anyway. This, on the other hand, is a really pretty awful piece of trash. I'm not worried about it injuring me just because button locks are pretty darn safe, except for the fact that this one is so easy to close with just my finger like that. But I'm going to be honest, this has never really been used for anything. I probably cut a little bit of rope when I was a kid, and this is never going to get used for anything. So this is going to go back into this little pouch and put it back into my box of shame from when I was a small child. And this is going to go back into its very pretty little pouch and get packed up to be sent to the next folks in the pass around group. So again, thank you so much for letting me check this out. And thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you guys next time. Wow. Okay, bye.